we do have a chronology that we prepared for you, just to give you a sneak peek of some of the key moments that happened in Nelson Mandela's life. Obviously, it's impossible to say everything that happened in his life, but the ones which shaped history and those that he is truly remembered for.
Right. I don't know where to start. Do we start in 1918 or 1912?
I don't know. Where do you want to begin?
All right, let's go to 1918, especially July the 18th day. That is the day that Rolihlahla Mandela was born. Later on, his British teacher called him Nelson.
So, absolutely right, 1918. This is the day of his birth, and as Tunya has rightly said, his initial name was Rolihlahla Dalibunga Mandela. So he was born in a small village, and much. I
bet we're gonna have Kenyan kids today calling themselves Rolihlahla.
Well, if we can learn how to pronounce it, sure. And so he's born in a small village in the Eastern Cape of South Africa.
Right.
Coming from a tribal clan, we understand that his father had royal connections.
He was royalty.
That his great-grandfather actually was a respected councillor of the royal Tembu family, and then his father was also a chief, and he had 4 wives, obviously going in with the tradition. And Mandela, it is said, was raised in a very traditional family, raising livestock, as any child would in a rural African setting.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Let's go over to, I know most people only know of his political side, so I bet we could jump straight to what he did for the politics of his country. And we'll start with the ANC. That will be just about 1990 to 1999.
So this is this is when he became president.
Right.
Well, 1994 is when he became president. But he served as a president of the African National Congress from 1990 to 1999. But before this, he had become a very important part of the ANC. He formed the ANC Youth League, and this is around the time when he also married his first wife.
Her name is Evelyn Mase, and they had 3 kids, Makaziwe, and the most famous one, Makgatho and Thembi, who died earlier on in a road accident.
All right, and then after that, we also know about his education. It is said that Mandela attended Fort Hare University and the University of Witwatersrand studying law. Of course, what is of note here is that he was expelled from one of those universities.
Right. I think that would be great news to a lot of people out there, I know. All right, great. Let's go to...
Sorry, before we move on to that, it wasn't until 1942 when he actually got his degree in political science, was it?
Right, in political science and also in law from the Witwatersrand University in South Africa. I bet what everyone knows Mandela for is the next bit that we are going into right now, and that is his imprisonment, his life as an inmate.
Right, in 1962, so Mandela was arrested and convicted of sabotage and other charges. It is said that because the courts couldn't find anything more substantial, they charged him with the crime of sabotage, which at the time was really big. So he was sentenced to life imprisonment, where he served in Robben Island and then Pollsmoor Prison, and this was really a home. He was under house arrest while an international campaign lobbied for his release, which was granted after 27 years in 1990. It's important perhaps to mention that right from the jump he bucked authority. So we mentioned earlier that he would refuse to do things that other inmates were asked to do. So he would refuse to ferry stuff to the prison gates, and so when he was warned, it was said that he said he couldn't kill anybody by refusing to do what he was being asked to do. So civil disobedience was very big for him in his time in prison.
It's also worth noting that in the years following 1956, during his trial is when he married his most famous wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, who later spearheaded the international campaign to free her husband from jail.
So he is then released on February 2nd, 1990. State President F.W. de Klerk, who had been visiting him, or rather who it is said received Nelson Mandela while he was in prison, reversed the ban on the South African anti-apartheid organization. Klerk then made an announcement that Mandela would be released from prison, and Mandela was released on 11th February 1990, a very iconic time for the nation and indeed the world. And it is here that he met Winnie Mandela, who had for a long time been lobbying for his release, who had been doing all these campaigns on his behalf while he was while he was in prison.
Right. Also, just taking you back to 64, we are from 1990. Let's go back to 64. And just one really important thing to note is that Mandela was not imprisoned alone. Just like in Kenya, we have the Kapenguria 6. Mandela was also imprisoned alongside other 8 leaders of the ANC in what became known as the Umkhonto we Sizwe.
Then we move to his work. As President Nelson Mandela initiated the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I bet a lot of people didn't know that, and this was to investigate past human rights abuses. So he also introduced policies aimed at land reform, poverty and eradication, among other reforms. And this is all while he was president. When it comes to the awards, it is well known that he received the international acclaim for his anti-colonial and anti-apartheid stance, receiving over 200 awards, including the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize. And at that time, he stood side by side with President F.W. de Klerk, who also received...
They actually shared the award.
That's
a point most people don't remember, because when we talk about de Klerk and they see he's a white man, they think we're talking about apartheid. How can a white man receive this? But actually, going back to South African history, F.W. de Klerk played a great role in ensuring that South Africa eventually was reunited, and no wonder he was honored in 1993 with the Nobel Peace Prize.
So that was in 1993. He gets awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize. A year later, he becomes president and entrusts his day-to-day business with his deputy, Thabo Mbeki, and then he leaves the presidency to him, ideally, and that's when he started getting global acclaim.
Great, and that was in 1997 when Mandela handed over the presidency to the ANC, to Mbeki, and officially stepped down as president 2 years later. That was in 1999, after the ANC overwhelming victory in the national elections in South Africa.
Now, what you're seeing on your screen right there is something that we all know, that Nelson Mandela was and still is held in very high regard, especially within South Africa, but even around the world. And he is often referred to as the father of the nation. He has very many words, very many names to that effect. A close friend of his, it has emerged, was Bill Clinton, who he spent a lot of his time with. And in one of the documentaries, it is said that Nelson Mandela would call at odd hours of the morning in South Africa to call Bill Clinton, obviously for issues that were relating to national matters. And the first thing he would do, according to Bill's memoirs, was ask how his children, how his child was. How is your wife? How is your child? And so they created that bond. Yeah, he created that bond. But of course, because of some of the things he did as a global leader, he got respect for that.
Exactly. And I'd like to draw attention to the year 2005. Now, Mandela has been known for many fasts. Now, in 1995, he came out and publicly announced that his son, Magado, had actually died of HIV and AIDS at the age of 54. We don't see that coming out of leaders anywhere in the world.
Right, but a lot of his works, or a lot of what happened to him, can be found in his biographies. Long Walk to Freedom is well known. It was published in 1994. It has an extended version, which is called No Easy Walk to Freedom. I think you have that copy, do you?
Right.
In 1965.
For those of us who don't like reading, there are movies.
There are also movies, right. I think it's safe to say that he has also shaped the social platform in South Africa. There's now a clothesline known as 4664, which was his prison number, which uses South African materials, raw materials, to make South African wear for South African people. And also retirement and later career.
Great. Mandela retired from retirement. We just had that from one of his quotes. Clearly a man who even after stepping out of the public light, he still had a lot of input in his government, in leadership, in politics, and so we don't really see him stepping out of the stage. Only that comes after his ill health. But we see a man who struggles to try and pass his legacy and his wit to the generations that come after him.
And of course, there are those quotes which I believe it would be unfair to even go through this without mentioning a few of them. One of which is, I have said the first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. Great peacemakers are all people of integrity, of honesty, but mostly humility. So that's Nelson Mandela for you. He is survived by his wife, Graça Machel,
Right.
who incidentally said that she does not need to change her name. Obviously, she was married to Samora Machel and says that she
Another first. Married to two presidents in one lifetime.
Married to two presidents in one lifetime, saying that she doesn't need to carry the name Mandela because it's already big enough.
Right.
And it was in relation to when he does eventually pass, and she said that he has created a history for himself where he doesn't need other people to carry his name. I don't know if I've made sense there.
Loss of sense.